"Get him out of here before the other customers leave," a sharp voice demanded, cutting through the low hum of conversation in the small Chicago diner. Emily Carter, a 24-year-old waitress with a soft gaze and quick reflexes, froze for a moment, her hands gripping the edge of a wooden table as she noticed the man stepping through the rain-slicked door. His coat thin and worn, the hood dripping, shoes scuffed and damp. Every eye in the diner seemed to turn toward him, some filled with irritation, others with quiet judgment, but Emily felt something else, a fleeting sense of recognition, as if she understood the weight of exhaustion and the need for human kindness. She quickly moved to the counter, slid a warm bowl of soup across before anyone could object, and offered a small smile that carried more warmth than the chilly evening outside. The scent of fresh coffee and baked bread mingling with the aroma of the meal, creating a soft cocoon around them. The man, James Walker, paused, glancing at Emily with a subtle nod, his face lined with years but his eyes reflecting a gentle intelligence, the quiet dignity of someone who had lived through much yet remained unbroken. Murmurs rippled across the diner as a few customers exchanged glances, one pulling out a phone to capture the scene, a sense of tension hanging like the gray clouds outside. But Emily maintained her calm, moving with fluidity as she refilled a glass, her actions deliberate yet unassuming, a testament to her habit of seeing people rather than labels. Outside, rain streaked down the windows, distorting the neon glow from the sign above, droplets tapping rhythmically against the glass, the soft clatter of cutlery punctuating the distant murmur of traffic, grounding the moment in reality while highlighting the contrast between the mundane and the extraordinary. Emily's voice, steady and clear, addressed a nearby customer who had muttered a complaint. "He is welcome here, just like anyone else." Her tone firm without hostility, creating a ripple of surprise. A subtle shift in the room's energy as heads turned and the camera phone lowered slightly, the atmosphere charged with an unspoken lesson about empathy and courage. James's eyes softened, a small smile brushing his lips, acknowledging the rare kindness extended without expectation, a gesture that weighed heavier than any words could carry, the hum of the diner continuing, yet the moment suspended in a delicate balance of human connection, as if time itself paused to honor the decision to act with compassion first. Emily felt a warm flush of satisfaction as she retreated to a nearby station to arrange orders, her hands steady, movements precise, her heart quietly swelling with the unspoken promise that small acts of goodness often ripple outward, unseen yet profoundly felt, the diner's muted light reflecting softly on the rain-streaked window, the scene encapsulating the fragile intersection of judgment and kindness, where a simple act could pivot the course of lives, shaping a narrative that was unfolding quietly yet powerfully, setting the stage for events neither Emily nor James could yet anticipate. And as the door closed behind a departing customer, the air seemed charged with anticipation, the quiet resilience of human decency preparing to meet its unforeseen reward. The morning sun streamed weakly through the diner's front windows, casting long shadows across the worn wooden floor as Emily Carter moved gracefully between tables, carrying trays filled with steaming cups of coffee and plates of eggs, the warm scent mingling with the faint aroma of rain that still clung to the air outside. James Walker sat quietly in a corner booth, the soft leather creaking slightly as he shifted, hands folded neatly on the table, eyes scanning the small crowd with a mix of curiosity and quiet appreciation, a subtle smile forming as he observed the gentle interactions between Emily and the other patrons, the way she remembered regular orders and offered kind words to strangers alike, a rhythm that made the place feel less like a business and more like a community hub. A child in a high chair giggled, reaching for a syrup bottle, and Emily leaned down to steady the little hands, her soft voice full of warmth and encouragement, while James's gaze lingered for a moment, the innocence of the moment contrasting with the uncertainty of his own situation, yet providing a rare sense of comfort and connection. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving streets glistening with moisture, reflections of streetlights bouncing off puddles and car windows, the sounds of tires on wet asphalt a gentle accompaniment to the low hum of conversation inside, the diner's neon sign flickering faintly in the distance, casting a soft red glow that illuminated James's thoughtful expression, highlighting the lines of experience on his face and the quiet dignity that remained despite hardship. Emily approached, setting down a small plate of oatmeal with fresh fruit in front of James, her hand brushing lightly against his, an unspoken gesture of respect and acknowledgement, and he responded with a nod, his eyes meeting hers in silent gratitude, a connection formed not through words but through understanding and shared humanity. the subtle interplay of kindness and attention creating a fragile yet powerful bond that seemed to suspend the ordinary flow of time. Nearby, a couple debated over the best coffee choice, their voices low and friendly, while Emily seamlessly attended to their table, her movements fluid, her expressions gentle yet focused, a professional mastery infused with genuine care, and James watched, noting the way she balanced efficiency with empathy, a skill that went unnoticed by most but resonated deeply with him, stirring a sense of hope and reassurance. The air was filled with quiet laughter, the soft clatter of silverware, the muted hiss of the coffee machine, and the occasional creak of the old floorboards, each sound grounding the scene in reality while emphasizing the warmth of human connection in a world often cold and indifferent. James's fingers drummed lightly on the table as he considered the small miracles of simple gestures, the way Emily's attentiveness transformed mundane routines into meaningful interactions, the promise of a day that might hold unexpected surprises, the gentle unfolding of events that could alter the course of life in ways not immediately visible, and the diner, a humble space filled with the quiet hum of life, became a stage for possibilities, where a single act of kindness could echo outward in ways both profound and unforeseen. James Walker felt a quiet anticipation as he watched the diner fill with the lunchtime crowd, the hum of conversations mingling with the clatter of plates and the soft hiss of the espresso machine, while Emily Carter moved with effortless grace, her uniform tidy, her smile welcoming, and her eyes bright with genuine interest in each patron. A family entered, their laughter filling the room, and Emily approached with a friendly nod, taking their orders while James's gaze lingered on her. Noticing the gentle way she reassured a nervous toddler, the subtle tilt of her head conveying empathy without a word, and he felt a pang of admiration for her ability to see and acknowledge the humanity in everyone, including him, a homeless man whose presence might have gone unnoticed in other places. He sipped the coffee she had placed before him earlier, the rich aroma grounding him, while he watched the interactions around him, a quiet rhythm of ordinary life that contrasted with the uncertainty of his own circumstances, yet in this safe, welcoming environment, he could almost forget the difficulties outside, the daily challenges that had defined his existence for months. A young couple at the counter debated over sandwiches, and Emily offered suggestions with a soft laugh, her demeanor calm and engaging, weaving a sense of warmth and community into the fabric of the diner, and James noted every detail, the way her hands moved, the way she listened, the way she connected with each person as though time itself had slowed to accommodate her attentiveness. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds, glinting on wet pavement, reflecting hints of blue and gold, a subtle reminder that the world continued beyond these walls. Yet within the diner, the atmosphere was intimate and protective, a small sanctuary where kindness and attentiveness created an invisible shield against indifference and judgment, and James felt a tentative hope that his own story might intersect meaningfully with hers. The door jingled as another customer entered, and Emily's head turned, acknowledging them with the same warmth and professional efficiency, and James allowed himself a moment to imagine the possibilities, the way small gestures, offered without expectation, could ripple outward, changing the course of a life in ways not immediately apparent. He thought about the times he had given what little he had to others, the coins or a smile, and now, sitting here, receiving a simple act of recognition and respect. He felt a profound connection to the idea that empathy could transcend circumstance, that his presence mattered, and that someone like Emily could offer not only service but genuine human acknowledgement, a rare gift that transformed the ordinary into something deeply meaningful. He adjusted the worn jacket around his shoulders, feeling the comfort of a safe seat and the scent of brewed coffee mixing with the faint perfume of pastries, and in that quiet, almost imperceptible moment, he understood that his day, and perhaps his future, had already begun to change, not with dramatic fanfare, but through the steady, compassionate rhythm of a young woman who saw him, acknowledged him, and treated him with dignity, setting the stage for a series of events that would alter his life forever. The lunch rush reached its peak just after 1 o'clock, and every booth inside the diner seemed occupied, the air filled with the aroma of grilled sandwiches, fresh coffee, and warm soup, while rainwater still glistened on the sidewalk outside like scattered pieces of silver beneath the afternoon sun. Emily Carter moved quickly between tables, balancing plates and coffee pots with practiced ease, her smile steady despite the growing pressure of the crowd, and from his corner booth James Walker quietly observed the organized chaos around him, occasionally lifting his coffee cup while listening to the overlapping voices that blended into a familiar rhythm. Then the front door opened and a well-dressed businessman stepped inside, expensive watch gleaming beneath the lights, polished shoes clicking against the floor, and after glancing around the room his eyes settled on James, lingering longer than necessary before a faint smirk appeared on his face. He chose a nearby table and sat down. But instead of opening the menu he continued looking toward the corner booth, his expression carrying the kind of confidence that often came from never being challenged, and after several moments he leaned back in his chair and spoke loudly enough for surrounding customers to hear, asking whether the diner had started offering free meals to anyone who wandered in from the street. The conversation throughout the room immediately softened, forks paused halfway to mouths, and several people exchanged uncomfortable glances while James remained silent, lowering his gaze toward the table as though he had heard similar remarks countless times before. Emily froze beside a nearby booth, a tray balanced carefully in her hands, and for a second the entire diner seemed suspended between action and silence. The businessman chuckled and continued, questioning whether paying customers should have to share the restaurant with people who clearly could not afford to be there. His words floating across the room like cold air slipping beneath a doorway, and a few nervous laughs followed from customers unwilling to challenge him. James slowly wrapped both hands around his coffee mug, saying nothing, his expression calm yet distant, while Emily felt a familiar ache in her chest, the memory of difficult years from her own childhood resurfacing. Memories of watching people judge her father after he lost his job and struggled to rebuild his life. She set the tray down and walked directly toward the businessman, her heartbeat steady despite the tension filling the room, and when she finally spoke her voice was calm enough to make everyone listen. She reminded him that every person who entered the diner deserved respect, regardless of their appearance, their circumstances, or the balance in their bank account, and the businessman seemed surprised that a waitress had challenged him publicly. He attempted to laugh it off, insisting that he was simply stating facts, but Emily did not step back, explaining that character could not be measured by clothing, and dignity could not be determined by someone's current situation. Silence settled across the room once more, heavier now, and even the kitchen seemed quieter for a moment. James looked up slowly, meeting Emily's eyes, and for the first time since entering the diner there was something deeper in his expression, not gratitude alone but genuine respect. The businessman shifted uncomfortably in his seat, suddenly aware that nobody around him appeared amused anymore, and after a few awkward seconds he opened his menu and stopped talking altogether. Conversation gradually returned throughout the diner, the tension easing like a storm moving beyond the horizon, but something had changed, because every person who witnessed the exchange now understood exactly where Emily stood, and as she returned to her duties she noticed James watching the rain-streaked window with a thoughtful expression, as though her simple act of courage had confirmed something he had been quietly searching for all along. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the diner, painting golden streaks across the floor where the chairs had been neatly pushed under the tables, and Emily Carter moved from booth to booth with a rhythm perfected over countless early shifts, her tray carrying fresh coffee and breakfast plates, while James Walker watched quietly from the corner, the calm of his presence contrasting with the bustling energy around him. A small, weathered notebook lay open beside him, filled with sketches of the city, hints of his thoughts and observations, and as Emily set a cup of coffee in front of a regular customer, she noticed James glance up, their eyes meeting for a brief, understanding moment that carried a warmth neither needed to explain. Outside, the city seemed to stir with its usual noise of honking horns and distant construction, yet inside, the hum of conversation blended with the clatter of dishes into a comforting soundtrack of normalcy, a temporary shelter from the world beyond the glass. As she walked past James, a gentle smile played across his face, subtle yet meaningful, acknowledging the small kindnesses she performed for everyone in her path, the effortless way she remembered names, orders, and stories, and he made a mental note of her patience and grace, attributes rarely found in such abundance. A group of teenagers entered, laughter and chatter filling the air, and Emily approached with her practiced attentiveness, listening, responding, making each feel seen while James observed, the quiet pride in his chest growing as he noted her unwavering compassion, the way she extended dignity to each person regardless of their place in life. The morning continued, customers coming and going, some leaving small tips and words of gratitude, others absorbed in their own worlds, yet in this environment a delicate balance of respect and attention prevailed, maintained by Emily's skillful navigation of both service and human connection, and James felt an expanding sense of belonging, not just to the diner but to the subtle network of kindness that she seemed to orchestrate effortlessly. At one point, a homeless man hesitated at the door, unsure of entry, carrying a small tattered bag, and Emily greeted him warmly, gesturing to a seat, offering a coffee without judgment, her eyes reflecting understanding rather than curiosity or pity, and James felt the familiar tug of empathy as he watched this interaction unfold, impressed by the natural way she extended trust and care. Throughout the morning, moments like these accumulated, weaving a quiet narrative of integrity and human decency, each interaction leaving traces of hope and affirmation, and James realized that witnessing these small acts, the consistent thread of compassion, was as valuable as any sketch he had ever made, each gesture a lesson in patience, dignity, and recognition. As the day progressed, the diner became a microcosm of the broader city, a place where differences were momentarily suspended, and the routine of kindness, led by Emily, provided a template for how ordinary actions could ripple outward, affecting both strangers and observers alike. And James, sitting quietly, felt an emerging clarity about the kind of world he wished to nurture through his own choices and the silent affirmation of those around him, a world where care and consideration were recognized as quietly revolutionary, capable of transforming ordinary mornings into meaningful encounters. And in this moment, the ordinary routine became a canvas for the extraordinary human connection that defined both Emily and the subtle influence she imparted on those who entered the diner. Late that afternoon, the steady rhythm of the diner began to slow as the lunch crowd faded and the warm glow of the hanging lights reflected softly against the front windows, where thin streaks of rain had returned to the glass, turning the city outside into a watercolor of blurred headlights and moving shadows. Emily Carter carried a small black check presenter toward James Walker's booth and placed it gently beside his empty soup bowl, her smile unchanged, her voice warm as she asked whether he had enjoyed the meal, and James responded with a quiet nod, thanking her with the same calm dignity that had impressed her from the moment he walked through the door. For several seconds he studied the check without opening it, then slowly reached into the inside pocket of his worn coat, his expression thoughtful rather than worried, and Emily noticed the hesitation immediately. Years of waiting tables had taught her how to recognize that particular pause, the silent calculation people made. When money was short, she glanced away politely, giving him privacy, but when she returned a few minutes later, the check remained untouched on the table and James sat staring toward the rain-covered window, lost somewhere deep in thought. Nearby, dishes clattered softly in the kitchen, coffee continued dripping into glass pots behind the counter, and the scent of cinnamon pie drifted through the air. Yet Emily's attention remained fixed on the quiet man in the corner booth. Eventually she approached again and asked whether everything was all right. James looked up and offered a small apologetic smile before admitting that he did not have enough money to cover the full meal, his honesty arriving without excuses or self-pity, only simple truth. Emily felt a familiar ache in her chest. She remembered nights from her childhood when her father had counted loose coins at the kitchen table, hoping they would be enough to buy groceries before payday, and she remembered how humiliating it felt when people looked at him differently after he lost everything. Without hesitation, she told James not to worry about it. He immediately shook his head, insisting that he never wanted charity and promising he would find a way to repay what he owed. Emily smiled gently and explained that kindness was not the same thing as charity. Before he could argue further, she quietly picked up the check presenter and carried it toward the register. The numbers glowed softly on the screen as she entered her employee code and paid the remaining balance using money from her own tip jar. The transaction took less than 10 seconds, but somehow it felt larger than that. When she returned, James seemed to understand exactly what she had done. His eyes lowered briefly before lifting again, and for the first time she saw genuine emotion break through the calm mask he had carried all day. He asked why she would do something like that for a stranger. Emily looked around the diner for a moment before answering. She told him that everyone needed help sometimes and that life could change faster than most people realized. Outside, rain tapped gently against the glass while headlights moved across the wet street like ribbons of light. James remained silent for several seconds, then leaned back slightly and studied her with an expression she could not quite read. Finally he spoke in a quiet voice that carried unexpected weight, asking a question that seemed oddly specific. What if helping him ended up costing her more than she expected? Emily simply smiled and said that some things were worth the risk. James nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful once again, and somewhere behind that calm expression, a decision appeared to form that neither of them yet understood would change everything before the night was over. The restaurant had quieted down as the evening rush ended and the soft hum of conversation blended with the clinking of dishes. Emily Carter wiped down a table near the back where James Walker sat quietly observing the scene, the gentle glow of pendant lights casting long reflections across the polished surfaces, and as she approached with a fresh cup of coffee, James looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope, their previous interaction still lingering in the air. He thanked her softly, his voice carrying the faint trace of surprise that someone would act so generously without expectation, and Emily smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, feeling the weight of his gratitude without needing acknowledgement, knowing that small gestures often carried more significance than words could convey. Outside, the sky had darkened to a deep indigo, and rain continued to patter lightly against the windows, the reflection of passing headlights glimmering on wet pavement, creating a mosaic of movement and light that mirrored the subtle shifts in James's expression as he sipped his coffee, the warmth of the cup in his hands contrasting with the chill from the damp city air. A soft murmur of conversation arose at a nearby table, a family laughing over dessert, and Emily noted the contrast between their carefree interactions and the quiet dignity with which James carried himself, his life marked by hardships invisible to casual observers. As minutes passed, he began to share fragments of his story, the words cautious at first, detailing the routines and struggles of living on the streets while maintaining a sense of integrity and self-respect, his narrative punctuated by moments of humor and resilience that painted a portrait of a life far more complex than anyone would guess at first glance. Emily listened intently, nodding at appropriate moments, her empathy evident in the soft tilt of her head and the attentive focus of her eyes, the diner fading into background as the human connection took precedence, each sentence from James bridging gaps of misunderstanding and breaking down invisible barriers that had separated them before. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, unnoticed, as the atmosphere between them shifted subtly from formality to trust, the space around them feeling almost insulated from the broader world, a quiet bubble of mutual recognition and shared humanity. As he spoke, James reflected on the unusual kindness he had received and considered the ripple effect of small acts. The way Emily's intervention had altered not only the immediate situation but the trajectory of his evening, perhaps his life, and he wondered about the unseen consequences of generosity, the chain of events that could extend far beyond the walls of the diner. Emily, in turn, felt a deep satisfaction in the simplicity of the interaction, knowing that her decision to act with compassion had resonated in a meaningful way, affirming the power of empathy and the quiet courage required to extend it without expectation. They continued to converse, the ebb and flow of words and glances creating a rhythm of connection, the rain outside a gentle accompaniment, until the diner's lights began to dim in preparation for closing, and both understood that this moment, fleeting yet profound, marked the beginning of a story neither had anticipated but one that would carry significance in ways yet to unfold, their lives intersecting with purpose and silent acknowledgement of shared humanity. After the last family left and the front door chimed softly behind them, the diner settled into a rare moment of stillness, the kind that only arrived near closing time when the coffee pots were nearly empty and the neon sign outside reflected across the rain-darkened street like a ribbon of fading light. Emily Carter carried a stack of clean mugs toward the counter while James Walker remained in his booth, his hands wrapped around the warmth of a fresh cup of coffee, his thoughtful gaze fixed on the droplets sliding slowly down the window. The quiet between them felt comfortable now, no longer the cautious silence of strangers but the natural pause shared by two people who had learned something meaningful about one another. After several moments, James asked a simple question, his voice calm and measured, asking whether Emily had always been the kind of person who helped people without expecting anything in return. She smiled faintly at the question, then glanced toward the empty tables before taking a seat across from him for the first time that day. Outside, a city bus rolled through the wet intersection, its headlights briefly illuminating the diner with a wash of white light before disappearing into the darkness. Emily looked down at her hands and told him about her father, explaining how years earlier he had lost his job during a difficult period and spent months sleeping in an old sedan while trying to rebuild his life. She remembered how quickly people changed when they saw someone struggling, how neighbors stopped making eye contact, how store clerks became suspicious, and how strangers assumed they understood an entire life story from a single glance. Her voice never became bitter, but the memories carried a quiet weight that lingered in the air between them. James listened carefully, saying nothing, allowing her words the space they deserved. She explained that those experiences taught her something she could never forget, that a person's circumstances could change overnight while their character remained exactly the same, and that kindness often mattered most when someone appeared least able to return it. The soft hum of the refrigerator behind the counter filled the silence that followed. James nodded, slowly, absorbing every word. And for the first time all evening there was a hint of emotion behind his composed expression, as though Emily had unknowingly touched a memory buried deep within him. He stared into the dark surface of his coffee and quietly admitted that most people spent their lives trying to impress important individuals while completely overlooking the value of ordinary people standing directly in front of them. Emily considered the statement for a moment before replying that she did not think anyone was ordinary. The answer seemed to surprise him. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he leaned back against the booth, studying her with renewed interest. Rain continued tapping softly against the glass while distant sirens echoed somewhere beyond the city blocks, but inside the diner the atmosphere remained warm and insulated from the outside world. Eventually James shared a lesson he said he had learned many years ago, explaining that success often revealed what people valued, but hardship revealed who they truly were. Emily listened closely, sensing that his words carried personal experience far beyond what he had revealed. Neither noticed the clock moving steadily toward closing time as their conversation continued. When she finally stood to finish her remaining duties, James thanked her again, not merely for the meal or the coffee but for treating him like a human being when others chose not to. Emily smiled and told him that everyone deserved that much. James watched her walk back toward the counter, and behind his thoughtful expression a decision quietly settled into place, one that would soon transform the ordinary evening into something neither of them could possibly imagine. As the first rays of dawn stretched across the city skyline, James Walker found himself stepping out of the diner into the crisp morning air, the streets slick from an overnight drizzle reflecting the soft gold of the sun as he walked past closed shop fronts and the occasional early riser heading to work. Emily Carter appeared at the diner entrance, her uniform slightly wrinkled from the previous night's shift, holding a cup of takeaway coffee in her hand, and as she spotted James she smiled warmly, the connection from the night before still lingering between them. James adjusted the strap of his backpack, his mind replaying the conversation that had unfolded in the quiet diner, how genuine moments of kindness had revealed so much more about a person than appearances ever could, and how he could no longer view the world through the narrow lens of social status or material wealth. The two walked together for a few blocks toward the small community park where James often spent time helping the elderly, and as they approached, they saw Mr. Henderson, the frail but spirited neighbor who relied on James's assistance to carry groceries and manage small tasks, slowly making his way toward a bench with a grocery bag in hand. Emily instinctively stepped forward to help, balancing her coffee in one hand while steadying the bag with the other, and James felt a swell of appreciation for her readiness to act without hesitation, the seamless way she moved to assist someone in need, reflecting a rare empathy that went beyond casual gestures. As they set the groceries down and Mr. Henderson thanked them both, James noted the soft morning light catching the edge of Emily's hair and the sincere expression on her face, and he realized that in this moment, she represented the embodiment of the lesson he had been contemplating all night, that courage and integrity were not measured by grand gestures but by consistent, unnoticed acts of care. People began passing by on the sidewalk, some giving polite nods, others immersed in their own routines, unaware of the quiet scene unfolding. And James felt a renewed sense of purpose, understanding that the smallest actions could ripple outward, altering the course of days and sometimes lives in ways invisible to the untrained eye. As Mr. Henderson settled onto the bench and began unpacking his groceries, Emily and James lingered, conversing in low tones about the neighborhood, the importance of community, and how sometimes recognition for good deeds came from unexpected quarters, not in applause but in the subtle acknowledgement of trust and reliance. James shared a story from his own past, a time when he had faced assumptions based on his appearance, and how someone's simple act of acceptance had shifted his perspective, teaching him that dignity and respect were universal currencies far more valuable than wealth or accolades. Emily listened intently, asking questions that revealed her genuine curiosity and her desire to understand experiences different from her own. and James felt a rare alignment of minds, the quiet synergy between them reinforcing the idea that actions grounded in kindness had the power to bridge gaps, mend misunderstandings, and cultivate trust across social and economic divides. As the morning unfolded, the city slowly waking to the rhythm of life, James and Emily remained by the bench, their conversation meandering from everyday topics to reflections on morality, empathy, and the unpredictable ways small decisions could create significant change. The park around them buzzing gently with distant laughter and footsteps, the air fragrant with early blooms and the remnants of rain, encapsulating a moment of shared humanity and mutual understanding that neither of them would soon forget. As the morning sun climbed higher over the quiet neighborhood, James Walker felt a sense of purpose solidifying within him as he followed Emily Carter along the familiar sidewalks, their conversation flowing effortlessly, touching on small joys and challenges of daily life. They approached a local community center where James often volunteered, the building's modest facade glowing in the early light, and as they stepped inside, the sounds of activity and laughter greeted them, a reminder that their world extended beyond individual actions to a network of lives interconnected through support and care. James helped organize donated supplies, arranging bags of food and clothing with meticulous attention, while Emily assisted the staff in coordinating volunteers, her energy and willingness to engage earning smiles and nods from those present, and James admired how her presence seemed to lift the spirits of everyone around. During a quiet moment, James noticed a young boy struggling with a heavy bag, and he and Emily moved swiftly to help, their coordinated efforts seamless, reflecting a rhythm developed through countless similar interactions, and in that small act, the significance of community and the impact of ordinary people became profoundly tangible. As they walked outside for a brief break, the sunlight catching the dew on the grass and the faint scent of blooming flowers filling the air, they discussed the importance of visibility and kindness, how small gestures could inspire larger waves of generosity, and how each choice, each willingness to act in the service of others, created a narrative of hope that could not be quantified but was deeply felt. They paused by a bench where an elderly man, Mr. Henderson, waved them over, his gratitude evident in his gentle smile, and as they assisted him with some paperwork and practical arrangements, James reflected on the contrast between expectation and reality, the way society often overlooked those in need while true character revealed itself in the consistent, attentive actions of everyday heroes. Emily shared anecdotes from her own family, moments when unanticipated kindness had shifted her perspective, and James found himself appreciating the layers of empathy and courage that defined her presence, the way she navigated both ordinary and complex situations with grace and resolve. As more people arrived at the center, seeking guidance or assistance, James and Emily moved among them, offering help where needed, listening, laughing, and connecting, creating an environment where trust and mutual respect flourished, demonstrating that impact was built on consistent, thoughtful engagement rather than singular dramatic gestures. The hours passed with purposeful motion, the rhythm of giving and receiving unfolding naturally, and James felt a growing awareness that the lessons of the day extended beyond the walls of the community center, into the broader world where each decision to act with integrity and care contributed to a tapestry of collective humanity. As they prepared to leave, organizing final details and ensuring everyone was attended to, James recognized the quiet power of ordinary choices made consistently, the resonance of actions grounded in empathy, and the way shared commitment between individuals like him and Emily could ripple outward, quietly transforming perceptions and lives in subtle yet profound ways, leaving him with a sense of fulfillment and anticipation for the moments yet to unfold in a day defined by connection, service, and shared humanity. The community center finally closed its doors for the evening, and a soft orange glow from the setting sun stretched across the parking lot as Emily Carter gathered the last stack of paperwork and prepared to head home. The day had been long, filled with conversations, volunteer work, and quiet acts of service, yet she felt an unusual sense of fulfillment lingering beneath her exhaustion. James Walker stood near the entrance, his worn coat catching the fading light, his expression thoughtful. As he watched families leave with boxes of donated supplies and children wave goodbye to volunteers, neither of them noticed the distant sound at first, a low mechanical hum growing steadily louder from the far end of the street. One volunteer paused and turned toward the road, then another followed, their attention gradually shifting away from their conversations. Emily looked up just as a line of large black sport utility vehicles appeared around the corner, their polished exteriors reflecting the amber evening light. The vehicles moved slowly and deliberately, one after another, forming an unexpected procession that seemed completely out of place in the quiet neighborhood. Conversation stopped. A mother helping her son into a car froze with the door half open. Volunteers exchanged confused glances while the vehicles continued approaching the community center. There were 12 of them in total, each identical, each immaculate, creating a scene that felt more like the arrival of a visiting dignitary than an ordinary evening in Chicago. Emily instinctively looked toward James, expecting him to appear just as surprised as everyone else, yet something about his expression had changed. He remained calm, almost reflective, his eyes following the vehicles without shock or curiosity. The convoy rolled into the parking lot and came to a smooth stop. For several seconds nobody moved. The evening air felt strangely still, interrupted only by the distant sounds of traffic and the faint rustle of leaves moving through nearby trees. Then the first vehicle door opened. Several professionally dressed individuals stepped out, their movements organized and purposeful. One man in a tailored suit looked around the lot before his gaze landed directly on James. Immediately his posture straightened. Another woman carrying a tablet hurried forward, clearly searching for someone. The volunteers watched in silence as more doors opened and additional people emerged, each scanning the area until they noticed the same figure standing quietly beside the entrance. Emily felt a ripple of confusion pass through her. She glanced between the arriving group and James, trying to understand what was happening. The suited man approached quickly, stopping a respectful distance away before speaking in a tone that carried unmistakable concern and relief. He explained that everyone had been searching for him throughout the day. Several others nodded in agreement, their expressions revealing genuine respect rather than obligation. Emily's heart began beating faster as fragments of the previous 24 hours replayed in her mind. The diner, the unpaid meal, the questions, the conversations, the unusual wisdom hidden behind James's quiet demeanor. None of it seemed accidental anymore. The volunteers around her whispered among themselves, trying to make sense of the extraordinary scene unfolding before them. James remained silent for a moment, looking toward Emily as the final rays of sunlight reflected in the community center windows. Then he offered a small smile, the same calm smile she had seen since the day they met, but now it carried a deeper meaning. Something enormous was about to be revealed, and as the gathered crowd watched in stunned silence, Emily realized that the man she thought she understood might be someone entirely different from the person everyone believed him to be. Emily could barely contain her astonishment as the last of the black sport utility vehicles came to a halt and the suited individuals began to move with precision toward James. The parking lot seemed to hold its breath as the volunteers and bystanders quietly observed, the evening shadow stretching long across the pavement, accentuating the surreal sense of anticipation that filled the air. James finally spoke. His voice calm and measured, explaining that he had been quietly managing several community initiatives and that his presence in the neighborhood was known to very few, yet the ripple effect of his daily actions had reached far beyond anyone's expectations. The lead man in the tailored suit nodded, acknowledging the explanation, while a woman with a tablet began to coordinate logistics, speaking softly but authoritatively, ensuring that the arrival would proceed smoothly without causing alarm or confusion to the neighborhood residents. Emily followed each movement, feeling a mixture of disbelief and admiration, as the volunteers realized the significance of the moment and the quiet hero they had interacted with without fully understanding his reach and influence. James glanced at her, a subtle smile conveying gratitude for her support and recognition, and she returned it, sensing the depth of impact that small acts of kindness could have when combined with perseverance and integrity. Meanwhile, the vehicle's engines were silenced, leaving only the soft sounds of distant traffic, the rustle of leaves, and the occasional whisper from onlookers attempting to make sense of the extraordinary scene unfolding before them. The suited individuals began to explain that their presence was not only a formal acknowledgement, but also an opportunity to collaborate on upcoming initiatives aimed at enhancing community programs, providing resources and supporting ongoing projects that James had been managing quietly in the background. The attention to detail in their movements, the precision with which they coordinated, and the respect they displayed toward James highlighted the importance of his contributions and the trust placed in him by those who recognized his commitment and diligence. Emily watched as the conversation unfolded, realizing that the ripple of impact from James's actions had been accumulating steadily, unnoticed by the public eye, and now it was converging in a moment that validated every effort, every decision, and every quiet act of service he had undertaken over the years. The volunteers absorbed the gravity of the encounter, some exchanging glances, others nodding subtly, acknowledging that they had witnessed a transformative event that demonstrated how integrity, compassion, and consistent effort could shape outcomes in ways that were both profound and inspiring. James stepped forward, offering a brief introduction to Emily and the volunteers, emphasizing collaboration, community support, and shared vision, and the visitors responded with clear enthusiasm, engaging in discussions about future plans while respecting the present environment and maintaining a tone of humility and professionalism. As the evening sky deepened into twilight, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose and connection, understanding that the day had evolved from routine volunteer work into a pivotal moment that would ripple outward, affecting lives, perspectives, and community initiatives in ways that could not have been predicted, and she recognized that witnessing James's story unfold in this extraordinary way was a reminder of the power of small, consistent actions in shaping meaningful change and unexpected opportunities. The morning sunlight filtered gently through the tall windows of the cafe, illuminating Emily's face as she glanced across the room at James, the young man whose unwavering kindness had quietly reshaped her understanding of compassion and human connection. The atmosphere hummed with a mixture of anticipation and calm, as if the entire space acknowledged the significance of the moment, the clinking of coffee cups and soft footsteps providing a subtle rhythm to the unfolding scene. James, now more composed after the remarkable encounter with the visitors the previous evening, reflected on the impact of his consistent acts of service, understanding that small, deliberate gestures could catalyze outcomes far beyond immediate perception, and Emily, standing nearby with a mixture of pride and curiosity, absorbed every detail, recognizing that witnessing such authenticity was both humbling and inspiring. As the staff moved gracefully around the cafe, attending to patrons and maintaining a steady flow of service, Emily noticed a subtle shift in the energy of the room, a quiet acknowledgement from the community that the story of a homeless young man's integrity had reached their awareness, prompting smiles, nods, and soft exchanges of admiration among neighbors and regulars alike. Outside, the morning light revealed the familiar cityscape in a new perspective, the streets lined with people whose routines carried on, yet whose awareness had been touched by the narrative of a person whose steadfast dedication to doing the right thing had earned recognition and respect in ways that were unexpected yet profoundly impactful. James and Emily conversed softly, sharing insights and reflections on the events that had led to this moment, discussing future opportunities to support the community and maintain the momentum sparked by their combined actions, and each word carried weight, not as idle conversation, but as a blueprint for meaningful engagement and continued influence in the lives they touched. The cafe patrons, sensing the authenticity of the interaction, continued with their morning rituals, yet the story had imbued a layer of thoughtful consideration and subtle inspiration, reminding everyone present that integrity and empathy are forces that ripple outward, affecting people and circumstances in ways that cannot always be anticipated but are always significant. Emily observed James's interactions with neighbors and staff, noting the ease with which he connected, the genuine interest in others' well-being, and the quiet humility that underscored every action, reinforcing the lesson that true character is revealed not through recognition alone, but through consistent, compassionate conduct over time. As the morning progressed, the initial shock of the previous evening's events softened into a sense of continuity and purpose, a recognition that life's extraordinary moments often emerge from everyday choices, and that those who commit to kindness and honesty cultivate a legacy that transcends immediate understanding. James reflected internally on the juxtaposition of his humble beginnings and the recognition he had received, acknowledging that the journey was ongoing and that the potential to influence positively remained vast, extending beyond personal accolades to broader community impact. Emily, inspired by the resilience and moral clarity she witnessed, considered her own role in fostering supportive environments, understanding that collaboration, encouragement, and awareness of others' circumstances are pivotal in sustaining meaningful change. Together, they planned modest initiatives and informal gatherings to continue supporting their neighborhood, each plan imbued with the knowledge that genuine compassion and ethical action resonate more deeply than any formal reward or acknowledgement, creating a ripple of positive influence that touched everyone in subtle yet profound ways. As the sun rose higher, casting warmth across the city streets and cafe interior, the two stood together, observing the ordinary life of the city, now layered with extraordinary understanding and connection, and realized that the story they had become part of was not only about recognition, but about the enduring power of empathy, integrity, and unwavering commitment to doing what is right.